So, good evening, everybody. Since we don't have a vice chair or a chairperson here this evening, I'd like you to go ahead and nominate somebody to actually conduct the meeting this evening before we get started. So if you all can nominate somebody, or we can go from there.
Thank you. I nominate Kate Kraxberger to run the meeting tonight.
I'll second that.
Motion has been made and properly second. We have all in favor?
Sure.
All right. Your meeting, Kate.
Okay, we will help you out.
I was going to say, you're going to help me out with this one?
Absolutely. Look to us for help.
So we will call it to order and ask for approval of the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as
Second it.
written.
So we have a first and a second. And then
All those
adoption
in
of,
favor?
oh, I'm sorry. All those in favor? Adoption of minutes. Anybody have any corrections from last time? Anybody want to make a motion?
I make a motion that the minutes be approved from the last meeting.
Second. That was me.
And all in favor? So moving on to new business. We have had a vacancy on the Planning Commission. Jennifer Bowman is no longer here, and she was our vice chair, so we need to vote in a vice chair for the remainder of this calendar year. Are there any motions?
I make a motion to nominate Kate Kraxberger as our vice chair of the Planning Commission.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Okay. Moving on, I guess, to our first piece of actual business for the evening. Not actual. So let's see. That's the public hearing for the readdress of one existing parcel from 6779 Oak Ridge to a new road name to be named Shandamor Drive in Clover.
If you can just make a motion or just open the public hearing first.
Okay.
Not a motion, just open it up.
So make a motion.
No motion, just open it.
Okay. So I open the public hearing.
Ready? Okay. I'm Gina Aaron, addressing specialist for 911. This public hearing is to review the reassignment of the existing address of 6779 Oak Ridge Road due to the development of Shandamor Lake subdivision in Clover. This will be addressed off of Shandamor Drive.
Is it time for questions for her? I noticed that staff went out to the home and
We
sent a
did.
letter. I assume that you still haven't heard from the
No,
current
she called us
property.
at 4 o'clock today.
Is she opposed to it changing?
No, she said that she wanted to know when it was going to start developing.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right. Am I done?
I make a motion to
First, we need
approve.
to close the public hearing.
Is there anyone that needs to speak?
So first, you need to ask if there's anyone else here who would want to speak for or against it.
Okay. So is there anyone here to speak for or against this proposal? If not, then we'll close the public hearing. And does somebody want to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve the changing of the address as outlined here from 6779 Oak Ridge Road to a new road to be named Shandamor Drive in Clover.
Second.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay.
Just, it doesn't sound like there was any that time, but next time, just make sure you ask if they want to discuss it.
Okay. So moving on to the Shandamor Lake application for the subdivision.
Good evening, I'm Marion Ray, zoning planner for York County. I'm here to present the subdivision for Shandamor Lake. You've just seen the parcel to be renamed, that is part of the, an outlying little parcel within the larger parcel. The property owner and applicant is SMGSC LLC. The location is on Oak Ridge Road in the Bethel Township and is zoned Rural Development 1 District. And the land area is 14.85 acres. They are proposing 11 single-family lots of at least 1 acre and a minimum lot width of 123.02 feet. The density is 0.8 units per acre for the development, and the site contains 1.491 acres of common open space. The site is one lot containing the 14.85 acres located south of Oak Ridge Road between Middle Road and the state line in North Carolina in the Bethel Township. So we're doing findings. We're still getting used to this, and I've got them spelled out in your staff report also. The site will be serviced by private wells and private and or shared septic. So they do have to have a DHEC permit for the septic systems for the minimum lot size of 1 acre. The land use is compatible with the rural development because it requires, it does not have a maximum density, but it's going to be less than 1 house per acre. And a TIA has been completed and no mitigation is required at this time. And it is, the development is partially bounded to an existing neighborhood to the south and to the east. And there's some single family to the west. And there's also a stream over there that's part of the lake that comes off of it. So it's a low density style development, does not require sidewalks. And they do provide open space despite not needing any for their zoning. It's 1.491 acres. They do not need or not required open space because this project came in October before the new zoning development. Do we have any questions for staff?
I guess not. If there are no questions, does anyone have a motion?
I'll make a motion that this be approved.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Nope. Let's see, moving on to Mabry Meadows.
There we go. All right, that one is mine also. I can get the clicker to move. Diane. There we go.
Takes a while for the big images to show.
All right, Mabry Meadows is coming. This is another October submittal, so they came in before the new requirements. The owner and applicant is Saluda Highway Estates, LLC. It is on Saluda Road in the Bethesda Township. It's zoned Rural Development 1 District, RUD1. It is a total of 87.04 acres. There's 59.47 acres in the current proposal, and they've set aside almost 28 acres for future development. The development is proposed 35 lots. Each lot will be at least 1 acre with a minimum lot size of 108 feet. The proposed current density is 0.59 units per acre, and the that are proposed to be developed within the current development, and for the total acreage is 0.44 units per acre. It also contains 13.16 acres of common natural open space. Let's see. And this one, there was a little bit of issue with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan calls the area agricultural, but staff believes that it is inconsistent, but with the project is complementary to agricultural due to the larger lot sizes, and it doesn't have utilities to the area, so it has to have the well and septic. I'm gonna go through the findings here. It's gonna be private wells and septic, and they do have to have their DHEC permits before we can plat it. And then it is RUD1. The single family homes are consistent. It's less than 1 unit per acre. They did have a TIA, Tier 2, that is in your packet there. The development is bounded to the west by the railroad, and they are providing connectivity to their area to the south with a temporary cul-de-sac. It's low density style development, so it's not requiring internal sidewalks. And their open space is 13.16 acres in excess due to their early submittal of 0 acres for the developed area of 59.47 acres. Do we have any questions for staff?
Yeah, it's a very simple, so with the future development, they would be able to credit that open space that's already platted toward the
Yes,
new
they will be able to
requirement?
use it toward future. They will have to hit 20% future.
Any additional questions or discussion?
I'm just looking around the area in general. I don't see any other developments of any density whatsoever. Are we sure we want to start heading in that direction in an agricultural area?
They do have the zoning for the single-family development. Future land use does say agricultural. Agricultural already has multiple uses within it, so it doesn't quite meet the standard for that, but they are the larger lot sizes.
Thank you.
Is that the reason why you used the term mostly consistent with comprehensive plan?
Any additional discussion or questions or a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I second.
All those in favor? So moving on to the rezoning.
Mr. Patel.
Yes, thank you.
So this is rezoning case 2105, Mr. Patel, 2216 India Hook Road, Rock Hill area, tax map 63307-03002. So the request is to rezone about 0.76 acres from RC1 to BD3 for the division of the interior of the building for a new liquor store tenant. So the building is not getting larger, but the use is changing, so that triggers a rezoning because the convenience store that's there right now is non-conforming in RC1, which is single-family residential zoning. So here's the vicinity map. You'll see that Rock Hill is across Hyatt Avenue from the property. The county has some residential behind this property, but it's kind of a mix of city and county in this area. So here's the aerial. It's a convenience store. It has gas pumps. Neither one of those are allowed in RC1 today. And you'll see there's a shopping center, strip shopping center across Hyatt Avenue, which is in the city.
Where's the shopping center?
To the south, kind of that grayish roof across Hyatt Avenue, that's a strip shopping center. Okay. And then there's residential on the other sides of the gas station. Nothing environmentally to speak of. The zoning map, you'll see that BD3 already exists along the India Hook Road corridor, not adjacent to this property, but across from it and a few properties down from it is BD3 already. RC1 is the neighborhood behind this property. It was all zoned RC1 at one time, and the gas station was gas station and neighborhood were developed prior to the zoning in 1987. So it was just all zoned RC1 at the same time.
That store was there prior to that?
I'm sorry, what?
That store was there prior to that rezoning?
Prior to zoning, that's the assumption here, because the subdivision was platted prior to the zoning in 1987. Okay, come on. Land use plan, neighborhood residential. So the criteria neighborhood residential talks about commercial uses at street intersections or adjacent to commercial, and this meets both of those criteria. So we have some site pictures. We'll be going back and forth looking at these. So some different views here, looking from the side, from the Hyatt Avenue, from the India Hook Road, and looking at some of the issues that aren't compliant with code today and what we're seeking to bring up to code to an extent. And these are pictures of the abutting residences and the retail across Hyatt and the animal hospital across India Hook Road, just to show that there's a mix of uses in this area. So the comprehensive plan, as mentioned a little bit earlier, it says neighborhood residential for this area. The criteria for commercial uses is that it must be located at a street intersection and or adjacent to existing commercial uses, which it is. The requested rezoning supports the comprehensive plan for those reasons, and the scale of the property could be considered neighborhood serving, just a convenience store. When I was there, it was a busy convenience store, so it definitely serves, I'm sure, the area and the immediate area and beyond. And let's see, went over that. So staff recommendations, we have a total of 12 different recommendations. They were all outlined in your staff report. I'm not going to go over them in detail, but if you have questions about those, we can go over those. And as Planning Commission, you recommend approval of all of them or some of them. Up to you.
I had a quick question. Looking at the layout that I think was probably drawn by the owner, it says another building attached. That's the lean-to that's already there. So there, just to make sure I understand, there would be no more building. It's only what's there.
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
I'm sorry. So on the proposed interior layout, I'm assuming
Yes.
that came from the
applicant.
the applicant. It says another building attached there at the back. That's actually already there, correct? There's no new
If you
building.
look at this picture, it's that white building.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe it's being used for storage.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that and make sure that,
Yep,
okay.
nothing new as far as buildings.
So is this appropriate time to ask another question? Or
Yes,
wait
I'm
until
ready
you
for
finish?
questions.
Okay. Now, I just want to be in order. Would you prefer I wait until you're finished?
I was finished, yes.
Okay, all right. I do have several questions, a lot of questions about the recommendations, but I'll start with this question. If this is and I'm very familiar with the store, and you said it was extremely busy when you were there, and I think the
Yes.
second part of it, he wants to basically split the building in half, use one part to continue to exist as is as a convenience store, correct?
Right. If you look at the view from Hyatt Avenue, you're looking kind of down the interior of the building. Where those doors are, it appears that's where they would be putting the liquor store.
Correct.
And then the convenience store would be cut in half.
Correct. So I'm just trying to figure out why a traffic study did not have to be done when technically it's going to be a separate business that will be generating its own traffic. Not that I'm saying he should do one, I'm just trying to understand because there will be, you're still going to have the same traffic as you indicated that was very busy there for the convenience store. I assume his traffic count won't stop or slow down. And now there will be additional traffic there for the liquor store.
Sure, I'll take that. And when you use the IT manual to look at some of these developments, a lot of it is done through the square footage of the building. And so since you're taking some of the square footage of the building, some of those trips are kind of already there based on that premise. And so in a way, it kind of evens out, if that makes sense.
I mean, I understand your explanation. I just don't agree with it, but I'm not going to argue with you what the manual says. That just doesn't make sense. But I hear your explanation, and thank you.
Okay, next question.
All right. Some of the recommendations, and I don't have to go through each one of them, but there appear to be several of them are just very much aesthetic, which means that if he were doing nothing to his building, he would not have to do any of these things. And now it just seems like a backdoor way of the county saying, we think this area would look better if done this. And my question is, for other small businesses, does this just make it just almost cost prohibitive for a business to do business? I got to now build a fence where if I just leave it the same, I don't have to build a fence. And I got to plant a couple of $1,000s worth of shrubbery, and I have to do all these things that I wouldn't have to do if I didn't do anything. I mean, why are we putting that burden on a small business who's going to generate another business, which is going to generate additional taxes and all these things? Why are we putting a measure that could be potentially, I mean, if he started going through all these recommendations, I mean, he's into probably several tens of thousands of dollars.
Well, I'll say, I hear your point on the cost of this. What we're doing is, so this property owner is essentially getting we're essentially doing an exchange. So he has a property that he wants to expand, put a new tenant in, but he's in a residential district. Well, he's not supposed to be in a residential district to begin with. So what we're doing is we're saying in exchange for getting a zoning district at BD3. Now, BD3 allows many different uses. I mean, well beyond what he's asking for. So once he gets this approval, he can do well beyond. And we have nothing that's going to stop that other than, if it doesn't fit in the site or setbacks or things like that. So he's getting, in exchange for his rezoning, he's going to have to improve his property. And this is something that would normally be done, if he was going to expand his property or change the use. This is something that would be done through the site plan process. So we're trying to do this it's not going to go through the site plan process because it's essentially an interior upfit. So we're trying to catch it through the rezoning process so that we can help bring it. This is not fully up to code. I mean, yes, they are aesthetic requests, but a lot of this is backed up by code, and he wouldn't have to do that unless he was, like expanding his building or whatever, and it got caught in the site plan process.
Right.
So he's not getting the full, meeting the full requirements. It's a little bit more of a compromise in exchange for his rezoning that allows him to do much more.
Right. And I don't want to get into I don't think this is the appropriate forum for back and forth. So can I just ask 3 questions and you just answer them and I'll be done unless something else comes?
I mean, it's up to y'all to ask whatever questions.
Once he gets, and you focused on it a bit, but if he gets the BD3, then he does not have to come back before council if he wants to do anything else that's within the BD3 requirement?
That's right.
All right.
That is right. He could tear down that building and put in a hotel if he wanted to, if it met the site requirements.
Okay.
There's so many different uses that he could do.
And you say this is in exchange. So my assumption is you've had a conversation with the person that owns this property and he agrees with all 12 of these recommendations?
So I spoke to him after we emailed him a list of these, and he didn't object to any of these. I mean, he may be, waiting for the public hearing. I don't know, but he didn't have an immediate objection. He had some questions, but not an immediate objection.
All right. My last question, unless someone else has questions, I can hold mine. I guess you can tell that just with small businesses and these onerous governmental requirements, that are just aesthetic in nature and not safety in nature. I just have a fundamental problem with it, and so that's why I'm spending so much time on this. Can you tell me the purpose, or what purpose would a landscape buffer, 8 feet high fence between the landscape buffer and the building that's not there now, what purpose will that serve in the future? How does that improve the property?
So that actually is to assist with the neighbors. So our thought is there, with this request, there may be neighbors that oppose. Because there is an adjacent residential property. Actually, it's the rancher, let's see, the rancher house that's over to the right. It says the budding resident to the east. So that property is right next door on Hyatt Avenue. And if you can look through the trees there, you can see the building in that picture. And if you go back to my other picture, the exposed dumpster and thin buffer, you can see how there's not a lot of trees in between. Now, code would require a specific buffer, which includes a fence and all that. That's a code requirement. And so if he was going to, expand his building or change the use of the building, he'd have to do that anyway. But because he's rezoning and it's an interior upfit, he doesn't get caught with that. But so what we're trying to do is require that. It would normally be required. We're going to require that to essentially buffer and protect from that residential use, from the business and the noise and the lights and the vehicle traffic and all that stuff from that adjacent business. So it's really a protection of that residential neighbor. That's what that buffer is.
But all that's there now, so what change?
Well, no, it's thin, so he'll have to add a few trees, and he's going to have to add the fence.
But you had said there's traffic and noise but all that stuff is there now. And it hasn't been.
I mean,
And I'm sorry.
it's hard to say, what's going to happen when the liquor store opens up. That's a new business. And, like I said, this is something that would normally be caught in the site plan review process.
But doesn't that go back to my previous question, which is why I started with, why was a traffic study not done, which indicated because basically traffic is negligible because it's not a business. But now we're going back and saying, but because of this, we want to require him to do all these things. So we're not going to make him do a traffic study because of the square footage and size of the building. Obviously, it's not an impact. But yet we're going to make him do it on this side because it may increase because there's a new business. But here's a broader point. And I did spend the last 2 days just reading the law, trying to read the code. And I don't see anything and I know if something is the law, we are supposed to approve or not approve. But I don't see anything in the code that says that he doesn't qualify to be a BD3 unless he does these things. So my question is this somewhere in law that he has to do these things, or are these just staff saying we want these things done? And if it is somewhere in law or the ordinance that he can't be BD3 unless he does these things, can you point me to it, please?
Well, he's not guaranteed to have a BD3 zone.
I understand.
Yeah, right. So this is, like I said before, it's going to be the exchange because with rezoning, there are no guarantees. And what we're trying to do is mitigate the potential impacts that this change and commercial development in general, that he has these impacts. He's always had these impacts. We're trying to mitigate them while we have the opportunity to do so. So we're not going to have that opportunity after he gets rezoned.
So the answer to my question is no. There's nothing in the ordinance or nothing in the law that says unless he does these things, then staff can't recommend BD3. Because obviously I know certainly council doesn't have to approve it, but we don't have to approve it with these recommendations. We still can approve him going to the next step without these recommendations. There's no law that says these things have to be done, what I consider onerous and cost prohibitive for many small businesses. May not be for Mr. Patel, but the next business owner that comes through here, it may be. I mean, removing a curb, I don't know what that costs. I'm not an engineer, but I would assume that's a pretty costly endeavor to have to start moving curves and building roads.
Now that one is more of a safety issue. That's having to do with the width of the curb cut. It's about 60 feet, and it's in the bottom picture down there. It's a 60-foot curb, the code is 40 feet. So the idea is to move it 20 feet and take it away from that intersection so you don't have cars running into each other.
So that particular element is in the code.
Huh?
So that particular element is in the
Yeah,
code.
many of these items are in the code, but he wouldn't get it. He wouldn't
Right.
trigger anything because of an interior upfit.
And I think that's where his point's coming in is you were unable to find these specifically written in the code.
No, because he's an existing business, we don't need a traffic study, and people are currently using it now. And only because he's here asking to do a separate business are we now saying you got to build a curb, where if he continues to operate with the same traffic pattern, same number of customers coming in and out, et cetera, then we wouldn't be asking him to do it. And what I'm saying is that legally, I don't see anything that says unless he makes his curb 60 feet, he can't be a BD3 because he's an existing building with an existing business there.
I don't think that's what they're saying. The way I read it and how I interpreted it was, for example, when you go in and make improvements to your home, if the building code has changed in that time, then you have to bring what you touch up to code. And our county code for business versus residential has changed. So we've put into place more buffer, more fencing, better curb cuts, things like that. I think that's essentially the issue is that, as we progress and and a little of it is aesthetic, especially for that neighborhood. I think it's more that as opposed to legally, sure, we could say, okay, go ahead, but really not, because it is in the code. It is in the zoning code as it is now. It just wasn't as it was then, but he wants to change, so he has to update.
And that's the way that I read it, is that because he is seeking a change from Rc-1 to BD3,
Right.
he is choosing to become subject to those
This
zoning
new
requirements.
zoning code, in the same way that if I improve my basement 10 years after I build my house and I touch my electrical that has maybe something's changed, then I have to go back and put in, electrical outlets every 6 feet as opposed to when it was built, it was every 12. It's moving with the times a little bit. That's just how I read it.
Again, I spent a great deal of time, and I think you've answered my question reading this, and I think he can be approved to a RD3. I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting me. He can be approved to that without these recommendations.
You can make a recommendation to approve without our
Correct.
staff
That was my
recommendations,
question.
or with some, or with none.
Correct.
However you like to see it fit.
When was do we know when the gas station was built?
I do not know when it was built. I know that he has owned it since the 90s, but I don't know when it was built. That's something the property records just don't give us.
I don't have a problem with these conditions. The gentleman is making a capital investment in a new business, and this could be considered part of his capital investment and bringing his business up to compliance with the current code. My bigger concern is if we change this to BD3, that, as you said, it can be almost anything in the future. So if this guy turns around next year and sells this property to somebody that wants to put in a casino or something, then we've got a problem. I would rather add another condition that it somehow or another prevents that from any other type of business being put in there. And I don't know if that's possible.
I don't know that it's legally possible to limit the uses. We're essentially trying to mitigate the impacts, but not limit the uses.
Is there any other classification he could go to that would allow him to put his liquor store in that would not open it up to all kinds of other potential development later?
I think the answer is no.
No.
Does it have to be BD3 because it's a gas station?
Yes.
I think because it has gas pumps, it has to be BD3.
It's unfortunate. BD3 is very wide open, so that's what he's getting. He's getting the opportunity to develop a lot more.
It's also a very small lot, so he'll be limited actually for parking and buffering. If he came in and took all that out and rebuilt something new, he couldn't get a whole lot because of the fact it's a small lot. So he couldn't get a casino, something large like that, because there's just not enough room for parking.
And that does, I guess, go back to another question that I had, which was similar to yours related to traffic. I understand there's the code of the law and the intent of of the law, when you're looking at different things, is I'm very familiar with this gas station, pass it a lot. What's the current number of parking spaces? Because I noticed one of those was to restripe and add additional parking per current code, but is
So-
staff comfortable with the use as a gas station and adding all those additional parking spaces? Because to me, you're splitting that property, adding in a use that is probably, people are gonna be there longer than they would as a normal gas station convenience store. As they go in, they shop a little bit, purchase, and then come out. I just worry that we're creating a log jam in this parking lot.
So when I was on the site, the honest thing is I didn't see any parking that was striped, so I was just counting the parking bumpers, those concrete blocks, and I counted 8 of them.
Okay.
Against the front of the building. And like I said, nothing else was striped. And as far as the parking requirements go, I believe, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong, it's the same ratio for retail. So, convenience store and a liquor store, both retail.
Okay.
So it's gonna have the same ratio. So he's gonna have to meet the parking requirements. It's gonna be the same. One way or the other, he's gonna have to meet them with
And so
striping.
what would that be?
Huh?
What would that be for?
We estimated between 14 and 16. And, some of that is at the pumps and, kind of,
So you-
if he improves that,
So based on the square footage of the building right now, and just the parking bumpers alone, he has insufficient parking,
insufficient stripe parking.
insufficient striped parking.
Yes. But, with this change of use, it's not gonna make a difference. And from a
I
parking-
understand that, but I just wanna, so basically as it is right now, there is not enough defined parking presented on
be
the
able to
site,
stripe
presented
it.
on the site, but he would have to stripe it to meet at
Right.
least that portion of the code.
And that's where my concern comes in, is you have ingress and egress for the gas station, cars moving around the pumps, because that's more than just pulling through if the pumps weren't there,
Yes.
that would be an empty space. So instead of just pulling through that empty space to occupy a parking space, you've got people trying to move around those pumps into what, just when I look at these photos, when I'm familiar with the building myself, and then look at the aerial photo, he's gonna be tough to get that many spaces in that small of a lot to comply.
Is there a plan? Has he shown you a parking plan or idea?
We do not have a site plan.
have a
I mean,
site
but let's say you do agree to rezone. So he goes to the site plan, he goes to our commercial plan reviewer, and he says, provide us a site plan, and you have to meet the parking requirements. Well, if he can't meet those parking requirements, then, he's not gonna be able to do what he wants to do. So you can get it rezoned, but if you can't physically make it possible, then it doesn't work. And that's one of those conditions as well, can't meet the rezoning conditions.
But the property is already non-conforming to its current
Use for the
designation
use.
for use.
Yes.
Okay. So and the only thing it can be where it would be conforming is BD3. I understand that correctly?
No. To make this property conforming, he would have to tear it all down and build a house.
Conforming to the current thing, but for its current use, then the only designation that it could be in is BD3. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
How many vehicles were for sale on the property when you were there?
When I was there, there were none. Apparently, somebody drives by there every day, and that has been an issue. So we just want to, if there is a future issue, want to say, hey, you can't do that. It says it in the requirements.
On average, there are about 2. If you pass by that, in any given month, there's about 2 or 3 vehicles for sale at any given time.
They're just parked up front there?
If you look at the aerial, it's page 38, you can actually see a vehicle for sale. It's parked right
Yep.
near the curb. That's generally where they're parked.
Got it.
And so they will generally line them up right there. And that's the image I was using to wonder about the parking spaces, because, I can count about how you can fit 8 in the front. To get the additional spaces, something's either gonna have to happen over where those cars would be sold.
Yeah, that's why.
Or
they
on
need
the
to get
end of the
additional
building,
parking.
but that's also where the entrance is.
You know, the thought is, well, if he reduces that curb cut, then there may be another parking space. And if he improves that side entrance, then maybe there'll be some more parking. You know, he can make it work if he makes these other improvements.
And so that parking would have to be brought up to code, including like handicap and everything else within.
Yeah, he
certain-
already has a handicap
does.
space which meets code. Or at least the number does, the configuration, I don't know.
And even with the additional business, does that number stay the same for handicap parking?
Yeah, it should.
It should.
Yeah, okay. You know, thinking about handicap, if he's going in to that, somebody's going into that side door, there may be an ADA issue he needs to resolve. You're looking at that the view from Hyatt Avenue picture. ADA needs to be ADA accessible. Because that's gravel, so.
Sorry?
I say that area with the puddle, that's gravel.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not accepted.
Right, I wouldn't think so. So do we have any other additional questions for staff? Would anyone like to make a motion?
The property owner may be here if there are any other questions.
Is the property owner here?
Sir, could you tell us your name and your address?
I was about to, yeah.
Please,
Surendra Patel. I live at 505 Cobbs Lane Court. And that gas station has been around since 1954. I'm the third owner. There's been issues with the septic there from when I got it and years on behind. So it's been RC1 since that time, and it's been a business all that time. So as well as me trying to have a liquor store, all convenience stores have a liquor store next to it. That's the norm, and I just want to be in the right zone since I'm going to get a liquor store. Now, the other question to some of these things which I was asked to do, I quite agree it's pointless. Me putting a fence back there, I agree, that's fine. Fence around the dumpster, I agree, that's fine, makes it look nice and neat. But to put plant and shrubbery on that back where my septic tank and my drain fields are, that's just gonna cause a big issue, and that's gonna mess up my septic tank even more. So he did call me and we talked to him on the phone, but I wasn't quite able to look at the list, and there's several things I don't agree with. The driveway, it makes sense. It would be safer to make that little driveway a little longer, and people wouldn't speed in. But I've been there since '97 and I've had no accidents. The police officers stop cars at the elementary school, and they come in there, parking all around there, and they block up the whole area worse than any other stuff. They have a speed zone right at that school, and they all pull into my lot. And that's gonna cause more problem than anything. I mean, they should go on Hyatt Road and then stop there, not straight in. I mean, it must make it easier because that driveway needs to come. It's gonna be costly. I can work with that. I know it is safer, but I've had no accidents since '97, and I don't know about the other people before me. So it's coming in and out. There's been no issues. But yes, the survey, I don't know what the survey is about. I mean, the whole area, I mean, you can see the survey, what it's like. I'm not doing nothing different than what it is. The buffer, I don't agree. The parking, okay, I can mark the parking, that seems reasonable. Everyone knows where to park, I can do that. The spotlight on the canopy, I don't know what that means. I mean, it's already, I got LEDs, which are a lot brighter than those big old lights we used to have. And I don't know why you want me to change those. It's brighter than what it used to be before. Using the vehicle to sell cars, I don't sell cars. I rent that space. They park their car and then they're selling it. It's for my customers. It's not me selling them. I'm just renting that space out to the customers.
I think that's probably the issue, is that that would be a code violation. So I think that's probably, and I can't speak to that because I'm not on staff, but I think that in itself is a code violation for that property. Are there any other questions of the council or planning commission, excuse me, to the applicant?
Just one. I was trying to go down your list, so what I have here checked is condition 1, condition 2, condition 7, and condition not, or condition 10. So 1, 2, 7, and 10 are the things that you feel like are already mitigated. 1 being the survey of the property, 2 being the 20-foot type C landscape buffer, 7 being the spotlight on the gas canopy, and 10 being installed and maintain the shrubs. Okay.
Because I don't see having the fence and the shrubs there at the back, it makes no difference. I mean, fence, put it down, separates me from the house. It's never been done in the years, but I don't mind doing that. But putting the shrubs is just gonna mess up my septic drainage.
If I can refer to number 7, talking about the lighting, and that was to bring the lighting up to the current requirements for the ordinance. We passed an ordinance a few years ago, lighting requirements, and these lights wouldn't meet that requirement, and they're probably, as you're saying, they're brighter, they're probably too bright, and that would be the issue, is because the spotlights would not meet the code as it is right now. All of these requirements here, I would say, just about every single one of there is what the current code requires, and that's the purpose of these conditions.
The spotlight meaning the floodlights or the ones under the canopy?
The ones that are out.
Okay, the floodlights.
Yeah.
I was under the assumption under the canopy. Okay, the floodlights, I just installed them 2 years ago because the big old projective lights, they weren't doing nothing. There was no lights at all. I mean, it makes it look dark. People were scared to come because it looked dark. So I made it brighter for invitation. Ladies were coming and seeing a dark old place, they want to come in. So I made it brighter so that they would be able to come in and be safe.
And there are plenty of lights out there that do provide enough light that are not shining off into the neighborhood, and so things need to be pointing down. So there's alternatives to use for lights.
Just tilt them down, is that what you want to do?
Okay, so do we have any additional questions for the applicant?
Okay, so I'm trying to reconcile. So you would agree to the fence, the dumpster, screening the dumpster,
Marking the parking.
yeah, restriping the parking. You would pave the area, the gravel area?
The gravel area at the back there where the.
Yeah, in the
puddle is?
back, that's,
Yeah, I want to do that. I just have to find a way to get rid of that water. I built a trench on the concrete to have it running away, but it's just hard to, I mean, I put gravel there, everything, but it's just hard to get that water away. So I'd have to, where it is, I'd have to put a drain hole there, let it go into it, and then going out into the storm drain.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way I've figured out how to get rid of that.
would you remove the poles? Would you be okay?
The pole, what they're talking about, that is a pole, that white pole, that's 2 pipes coming out. That's my ventilation pipes. That's got to be there for DHEC. I got Got to
Okay.
have those
So
pipes
those are
in
there
the
for the
summer.
tanks then?
Sorry?
Are they there for the
For the underground tanks.
for the underground
yeah.
tanks?
Yeah,
Okay.
if there was just pipes coming up, someone could hit that and that could cause more problem. The concrete's there to save, that purpose.
Okay, so I guess then, Brian, what's staff's response to that?
I think if there was a way to improve the aesthetics of it somehow, that's what we're looking for.
Okay.
Some way to remove the rust or paint it or something.
To make it look nice and clean, is that what he's saying?
I think the issue, and I don't want to speak too much, but because it is really supposed to be a neighborhood, and so we're worried about that neighborhood aesthetic and the fact that, am I correct, Diane, essentially? So, right, things to screen, things so that that's not the first necessarily impression.
But am I missing something? The store was built before the neighborhood, correct? Or did the neighborhood come up around the store? Or did the store
was
come
there
up
a
in the
long time
neighborhood?
ago. The store was the
The
initial.
store was there in
53,
54.
54.
And the neighborhood was there in 60. And it's,
The neighborhood
there
came up
before the
behind, yeah, the,
and the store was there before zoning. So the zoning was imposed on it, not, the store didn't violate any zoning.
so the store was there when the people built their houses there. Okay.
Mr. Sawyers, who owns that building a long time ago, he was the first owner. They used to have the store down here at Food Lion. It got burnt down and then they came down here and built this store in 1954. And it was just, India Hope used to be just a trail from what I heard, just a walking trail.
Thank you for the history. Are there any other questions? Any further discussion, or would someone like to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion for staff recommendation to approve this transition from RC1 to BD3, but with modifications to the conditions of approval, without the condition of what's numbered as 1, what's numbered as 2, what's numbered as 7, what's numbered as 9, and what's numbered as 10.
So would you remove those conditions or include those conditions?
Remove those
Remove-
conditions.
Just clarification,
And
thank you.
Thank you.
Repeat that as being 1, 2, 7, 9, and 10.
1, 2, 7, 9, and 10.
Thank you.
Yes.
Would you reconsider 7?
I think you indicated that was a safety issue with shining the light shining in people's house. I would reconsider 7, so I'll amend my motion. Amend the motion to approve the RC1 to BD3 with the removal of condition 1, 2, 9, and 10.
Is there any discussion? Oh, I'm sorry, is there a second?
I second it.
You can ask if there's any discussion. It sounds like y'all have discussed it.
Is there any additional discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Okay.
Moving on.
I promise the next two will be easier. So this is rezoning case 2106, Sam and Jennifer Dozier, 2850 Gordon Road, Rock Hill, tax map 437000035. So the request is to rezone 14.93 acres from AGC 1 to AGC for a construction of a second home on the property. So kind of unusual situation, AGC 1 only permits one home on a property. AGC permits 2 homes on the property, so they want to rezone to AGC. This has nothing to do with mobile homes. They do not want to put a mobile home on this property. Vicinity Map, it's near Gordon Road, and it's like 324, I can barely see it. Aerial of the property, you see there's a pond in the back, so imagine the house will be on the front portion of the property. So there is a combination of AGC, RUD, and RUD1 in the area. So AGC is obviously predominant here, so no problems with consistency with the area. Land use plan says agricultural, so this is consistent. This is a plat. Tract 1 is the parcel we're talking about. Tract 2 was sold off. So we're recommending approval of the request. York Forward shows this as agricultural, rezoning from essentially agricultural to agricultural. There's not going to be much change, and it's consistent with the plan. No reduction in the minimum lot size will occur with this rezoning. That's all I have.
And just to make sure I didn't miss anything, these are private citizens who own private property who just want to build a second home, and they're going to keep the existing home on the property and build like an in-laws quarter, home
Right,
for the
they want to
kids or
build-
whatever.
They want to build a full-size house for a family member, yes.
There's there's a condition when you build the second house on the property, does it have to be with same family, or can it be?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Building a second house on the same property,
Uh-huh.
is there something in the code that says that they have to be family members?
No,
No, so it could be, okay,
just a regular house.
okay.
Both of these zonings, AGC and AGC-1, both require 5 acres, and he's got
Yes.
14-plus acres that we're dealing with here, so he's still well within the zoning of
Well
either
beyond, yes.
classification. Yeah.
The lot size will not change.
I'm just jealous I don't have 14 acres that I could build me a second home on. So I make a motion that we approve the staff recommendation to allow these people to rezone and build a second home.
Second.
All in favor? Anyone opposed?
Okay. So this is the last rezoning. This is a little, kind of an interesting one. Lev Sachs, this is rezoning case 2107. Lev Sachs is the applicant. 3399 to 3409 Pleasant Road in Fort Mill. Tax map 72000000021 and 720000023. So the request is to rezone approximately 8.80 acres from RUD to BD2 for the development. Currently, it's a single-family home. We're going to demolish the home and develop an assisted living and memory care community. Community would have 6 single-story, 12-bed, 12-bath buildings. I have a floor plan. And they would surround community space and have walking trails, gardens, etc. for their family. So this is a vicinity map. This is in the middle of Pleasant Road between Carowinds Boulevard and Gold Hill Road. Here's an aerial. There's one single-family house on each property, and both would be demolished. Environmental map. So the zoning. So you'll see there's a big swath of RUD zoning. This is an area of Fort Mill that's transitioning into more dense uses. So the RUD zoning is not expected to continue, maybe in the near term, but in the future. So the If you look across the street, you'll see there's BD1 or BD2 property, so the office and the institutional is already located across the street, and I'll show the pictures of those properties. So this is the single-family residential is the future land use. Across the street is neighborhood residential, and we're reevaluating this particular area perhaps to transition it to neighborhood residential to match what's across the street. So the proposed site plan, you'll see it's, as said before, 6 buildings around some gardens. The parking is in the back. The stormwater is also in the back. And in the front, where they're not building, there's a hill. So it still has that residential character from the street. This is the floor plan. Kind of a different plan. Typically, your assisted living is a more massive building, but this is going to be broken out into, several smaller buildings. So the property rendering, so you have the rancher surrounding some gardens, so it doesn't really stand out in a residential area. So some area pictures of the subject property. You see that there's that large hill with the grassy area. That's going to remain. Daycare across the street, office across the street. There's a private school across the street. There's a lot of that office and institutional right across the street. Bailiwick is also across the street, so that's a single-family neighborhood. To the north, there's a property that is residential, but it's got a brick wall around it, so there's no real impacts to that property. So we're recommending approval of the request. So single-family residential is the designation according to the comprehensive plan. However, the comprehensive plan does not really discuss this type of land use or office use. So we're really looking more at the context of the area. And we believe because of the office and the institutional across the street, and then the more residential design of this property, we think would be compatible with what's the single family in the area. And as mentioned before, with the development pressure, coming from the Charlotte area, we would anticipate more of a neighborhood residential feel in this area. So any questions?
If no questions, does anyone have a motion?
Looks like to me it's not consistent with the current or future.
I'm sorry, what?
It doesn't look like to me it's consistent with the current or future comprehensive plan. Why do we want to recommend doing that?
Well, the comprehensive plan doesn't talk about these kinds of uses. So, like I said, we're looking at the context of the area rather than what the comprehensive plan says, because it's silent in this kind of a situation.
I thought about what you were initially, my initial thought was if you just look at it, just the text of it doesn't make sense. I think what really made it a much more palatable solution for me was the fact that there was, an actual site plan, a rendering of what we could see is coming. And I think it does present itself as a much more reasonable transition between what's across the street and the surrounding property. It's neither office nor residential, so I think it's a good transition for where it is, and I think it's specifically suited to that location. This project may not work a quarter mile up or down the road. That's my opinion, but I think where it is right here, with what is surrounding it, I think it is a good transition, and I think the site plan and the conceptual plans and the exhibits that were attached with it really presented a much more palatable reasoning for me to.
No, I did notice something, and I'm going to support it, but just out of curiosity, it says that the gardens and residents and their families but then it said there will be no impact on the schools and no students on the school. So I guess the assumption is these will be maybe an elderly couple with one having dementia or Alzheimer's or something, or?
The comment about families is for families who are visiting their elderly
Gotcha.
parents. Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
they don't live there.
Any further discussion? Anyone like to make a motion?
I would make a motion to approve.
I would second.
Second.
All in favor? Anyone opposed?
This next item is a text amendment to the tree survey exemption. As you recall, we recently adopted some ordinances for our open space, and so we've been asked to go back and look at one component of that open space ordinance, and so we're bringing forward to you an amendment to that to capture this. So this amendment will exempt tree shade requirements from new residential developments within RUD districts, RUD and RUD1, that are located outside the USB. And the tree safe area is still required. They're just not required to do a tree survey on that tree survey area. This came before a council zoning committee, and they felt that it was requiring a tree survey for these areas outside of the area, outside of the urban services area, away from utilities. It was a larger cost burden to local developers, and it really wasn't necessary to be able to do these tree surveys for these areas that are more in the rural areas. And then it will not impact the tree save requirement, but just a matter of not having to do the actual tree survey. And once again, it's only for properties that's in RUD, RUD1, and outside of the USB. Pretty straightforward one. So.
Questions? Anyone like to make a motion?
I make a motion to be approved.
I'll second that.
All in favor? All opposed?
So now we're up to the our next land use comp plan update. This is the element for land use. So like we've always done, we're going to go over kind of what it's about, what the influences are, what we're looking at for the future as we're looking at the update, and then kind of review the goals and see whether they align with the current needs of the county, and then get your comments and feedback so us to go ahead and make amendments to that. So first of all, as far as what this land use element is we're reviewing the existing land use. We're looking at things that have had any kind of large-scale new progress or projects that have happened since our update in 2016, and see how that might affect the growth pattern and direction. We're looking at our current existing future land use designations. Are they defined well in the comprehensive plan? Is there room for improvement to be able to better understand what those land uses are meant to designate and how they're supposed to function? We're going to be looking at any kind of current or nearing completion or completed pennies projects. A lot of times when you put in a new large road improvement, that might also affect the land uses around that. So kind of check in on those, see where they are, and see if you need to make any kind of changes because of that. As you remember, we've adopted some pretty large-scale ordinances recently. The landscape or the Lake Wiley overlay, we've increased the overlay area. We've added design guidelines. We've added the open space ordinance. Do those new ordinances, will they change the direction, the pace, the amount of growth we're going to have? So we'll look at what we've been doing recently, and then we'll identify some emerging issues and new things to consider as well. As we've had growth for new houses being built, are we running out of inventory lots? Is there going to be a new direction? Is the USB in the right location? Does it need to be contracted? Does it need to be expanded? As we grow in new areas, maybe the Clover area, the York area, do they need some kind of a small area plan? So we'll look at that as we review this section of the code or the other comprehensive plan. And then look at any kind of future. There will be eventually a Pennies 5 round coming through here, and so are there areas where we want to be able to consider for some future Pennies 5 projects? The Panthers, their new facility, while it's really more of a Rock Hill project, it's still on some of our roads as well, and how will that affect the land use in the area of the Panthers project? So we'll be looking at that one closely. And then with COVID, that's been changing in the office demand. More folks are working from home. Is that a small blip? Will that continue? And will then now be having more folks working from home? Are we going to have more people having things delivered to our house as opposed to going to a store? Do we have to have more distribution needs or the warehousing needs? So kind of looking if COVID might have any kind of long-term effect on our land use pattern. And then looking at our quality of life, or is your county in a position to be able to attract the needs of our current residents, and then also for companies to attract new ones? And so should we consider some kind of a quality of life matrix? Are we appropriately locating our new uses to be able to, is a school close enough to, is there a park close enough to a neighborhood? Are there buildings necessary close enough to residents, close enough to any kind of new offices? So looking at that land use mix and see whether we're meeting the needs of our current and future residents. So like we normally do, we're going to go through each individual goal, and I'm going to get your feedback on how it's written. If you like it, do you want to make some changes? Do you want to look at some different strategies? So this first one is to actively manage the context, scale, and direction of growth in York County to be consistent with available and planned infrastructure and services while also supporting economic development goals. That's a very large statement. So what this one here, it's focusing on the direction of growth. It's to keep growth within that USB. We're looking at keeping the directing any kind of new commercial development to the nodes. That's what this goal is about. That's what this goal does. And then to update the future land use map as large projects happen, any kind of like larger road project, and how it might affect the area. So we're going to pause here on this first goal and get any comments from you all and see if we just general comments about this goal and even the strategy as well.
I guess this goes back to the workshop, 1.4.2, considering a new zoning category that allows for high-density residential where appropriate. I know we had, in the workshop, the discussion was that the 6,000 square foot zoning, that new district that was going to be proposed. We're not going to implement, I mean, the plan is we're not, you know, we've been making the push toward the large lots, and now we got a new zoning district that puts small lots right back into it.
Well, this is talking about more in terms of apartments. The goal of this one was to be able to create some kind of a category that will allow apartments to separate those from other kinds of residential uses. So that was really the intention of what this was saying, was to be able to have a zoning category, zoning district, where we can just do apartments. Well, the main thing is to not do townhomes and larger lots. And so that was kind of to get that new district away from that. That was the purpose of that new district.
Okay, so could that be amended to take out the single family lot portion of it and just have?
I think we'll have to look at that as we go through the process. I think also, like we mentioned at the workshop, that it was important to be able to have some sort of smaller lot, higher density areas that in certain locations. So I think that was the purpose of that. But. Okay, there's no more comments on that land use goal. We'll go to the next one. And that was to promote a balance of mix of uses that support a strong and diverse tax base and the creation of jobs throughout the county. And so this one is it's focusing on a balanced mixture of uses that support jobs and to locate them at commercial and residential near employment centers. Those are some of the strategies. And then also to create the mixed use zoning district also being taken care of by ReCode. Like, so that was more about the, that balance of uses in this goal. Any comments on this one?
Is there something we can implement either within the comp plan or the recode about mixed-use developments? My concern is, over the years, seeing them, it's always kind of followed the same path. It's, they quickly build out the entire residential portion, and then the rest of it just kind of lags along until it's done, and not in any, if they did it at the same frantic pace that they did the residential, that, would get done just as, quickly, wouldn't be an issue, but it always seems to be build out all the residential, it's all done, and then the commercial and office, all that just kind of comes along when it comes along.
Yeah, I don't think the code has any build-out structure in terms of, how you can, what proportion you can do, which type of use at what point. Right now, they're being done as a PD, and so I think this mixed-use district has a better balance of uses to be able to, so you aren't heavy on one side or the other. But we can look at that in the RICO process, but I don't think we have any kind of, milestones that you have to meet in terms of you must do this much commercial before you can do this, or vice versa. But we can look at that through the RICO.
I mean, I would just think a couple of benchmarks in there would be good. Not, it didn't have to be this whole, tiered system, but
right.
I mean, because we've seen it time and time again.
Sure.
It's all residential. One commercial starts, and then you see all this other commercial land that's sitting there, and it takes years in some cases for that to come around.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's a better balance of uses that I think is going to help that. It's not going to be all residential with a couple of small out parcels. So I think we've improved that one.
Forgive me, could you tell me what is meant by urban services boundary?
Sure, the urban services boundary is a line on our map. And what that is saying is this is an area where we either have existing services or we might have some future services. And so it pretty much focuses on the area that's on the eastern part of the county, captures, the area around Clover, New York, and those are where we have utility services, water, sewer, the urban services. And so the intention is to be able to grow sort of within that area and then not expand out into the outside of the urban services area.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Looking at it's LU.2.3. It's coordinating with the municipalities and other providers to ensure adequate utility service. When we look at utilities, are we considering just electricity and water? Are we also considering broadband connectivity? I know that at a federal level, that's being more and more looked at as a utility.
Right.
And necessary instead of as providers choose to build it out.
Yeah, we pretty much typically look in terms of the water and sewer, those sorts of utilities. We really haven't gotten into the regulation or distribution or location of broadband. It's held by, and I'm sure there's agreements out there as to who gets to what area, but the county that I know of really has not gotten involved in that. We can make a discussion point to see where is there a way that us to get involved. We do get phone calls on a regular basis from some of the utilities, like Emporium, looking about where are we growing, where they should start looking for new lines. So they connect to us. We don't really push out to them any kind of needs.
I'm wondering, and this would build kind of on, Matt, your concern there that there's just not a push on the business side. Well, businesses are going to be looking for connectivity.
Right.
Especially if you move to where a company can relocate out of Charlotte or a more expensive urban center into a more rural part of the county. Well, they can get the necessary connectivity all day long in an urban center. They move into a rural area. That's a required utility for them to do business. But if we don't I don't know that we can, but if we don't have that out there, there's, they have to wait on that provider, or they have to foot the entire bill of extending that service on their own.
Right.
And that just doesn't really lend toward, business growth, in my opinion.
And there may be, discussions among the other folks that I'm not involved with in terms of development. They might be working with Emporium and AT&T, working on them, making sure they're aware of. And so that for the larger companies, but
yeah, I was mainly just seeking kind of what do we define a utility as?
Right. I get it, yeah, typically water and sewer,
That's what drives the growth.
yeah, for development, yeah. Okay, if there's no more questions on this one, I'm gonna go on to the third one. And this is to promote quality development that's environmentally responsible and compatible with local character. So this one's obviously focused on quality development. So two things we've done recently was we have adopted the new open space ordinance to get a better quality open space, more open space. And then we also recently adopted the design guidelines for residential development in Lake Wiley area. Whether that goes further, as soon as we don't know yet, it's kind of see how it works in Lake Wiley and we'll go from there. But this section here is just talking about good quality development and what we can do to kind of help move that along. Comments on that one?
I do have a question.
Sure.
Considering I'm also new, looking at that one specifically, the design guidelines that are implemented in Lake Wiley, I see that it's here. It's may consider other locations if proved successful. What does that timeline look like? Because if you don't bound it, then
Sure.
it becomes, when we choose to determine that it's either met or not met. All right.
At this point, there hasn't been any new development within Lake Wiley to have to approach that and see how it's working.
Right.
Because it is new, and then also a lot of folks already have entitlements and they're working on their previous requirements.
Right.
So I don't know when that it's going to be the time to be able to expand that, but it'll be a while before we can actually see how it's functioning, how it's working.
Okay.
So I can't really give you a time. We could probably say we'll add some kind of timeline to that, but
Right.
it'll be a while before we see how it's working.
Yeah, maybe it's not a timeline, maybe it's a number of developments.
Sure, some kind
Just,
of
you know,
indicator of that.
Once we've done a certain number of developments, then we can review it. It's just that if we leave it unbounded,
Right.
it quickly will go away and
Yeah. That's a
we'll be
good
back
comment.
here again in a couple years.
Yeah.
And in terms of enforcement, for lack of a better word, of these things that we're putting down on paper, where does that fall? I mean, we've had this conversation. I don't feel like, our current things of this nature are being enforced. So how does that happen?
Like we've talked in the past, I feel as though we've added some more staff members to be able to look at these things and to really push the enforcement part. So I do feel as though we've made some internal staff additions to be able to get out there and enforce it and make sure it's being done properly. So,
We were talking about watershed several years ago. We haven't gotten any further on that.
No, I believe that we did, and I meant to go back and talk to the folks over in stormwater. I believe they did increase some of the stream buffers, but I didn't know what they were, so I've got to go back. Matt, you might know that.
Yeah.
I think we've done significant changes to our stream buffers to expand that, make it a larger buffer. So yeah, we did
There
that.
are some larger, the stormwater ordinance that was passed originally in 2019, it included provisions for buffers, and so it's now implemented in part of the working ordinance. So, and I've worked with stormwater on that since that was being proposed. So I feel like I'm pretty knowledgeable on that.
Any more comments on goal number 3? If not, I'll go to number 4. And that is to preserve the rural character in areas near and beyond the adopted urban services boundary while providing opportunities for compatible rural development. And this is kind of similar to the first goal and second about directing growth to a certain area. And that's to keep the intensive uses away from the rural areas, to discourage that water and sewer expansions where we don't want to have growth, because when you push that out there, you're going to push more growth. And so that's kind of just keep the growth within the USB and to be able to leave rural areas as they are, at least for the next number of years. Any questions on or comments on land use number 4? All right. If not, I'll just let you know that this is our final element to be looked at that's new for you guys. At our next meeting, we're going to just give you a brief overview that we've been required by state law to add another element to our comprehensive plan called the resiliency element. And that's just kind of talking about how things with climates and rain and making sure we're able to handle any kind of flooding. And so it's a whole new section for the comprehensive plan. And so we'll give you an overview of it at the next meeting. And then we'll start moving into hopefully maybe a workshop to be able to talk about the land use map in the future, very soon future. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Let's see, time to adjourn?
There's a
Tracking
reason on the
sheet.
tracking sheet. Any
Oh, yeah.
comments on the tracking sheet?
Are there any questions or concerns about the tracking sheet? Yeah? Is there a motion to adjourn? All in favor?